Ready to get started? For those who don't know me, I'm Bruce Bechtel. I'm a professor of political science in the Department of Security Studies and Criminal Justice. I have here a very special night for all of you, but before I do that, I need to thank a few people. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to sit down and let Mr. Tokola run the show. First of all, this is an event sponsored by the Korea Economic Institute, which is a think tank in our nation's capital. They paid for everything. They brought these guys in, they're paying for their room and board, etc., paid to fly them in here. They do this at about 15 to 20 universities every year, places like Harvard, Stanford, Georgetown, and of course, Angelo State. So we're very lucky to have them. So I'd like to thank the Korea Economic Institute and its vice president, Mark Tokola, who's here. That was a golf clap one. And whose son is a student in my security studies program, so good stuff. I'd also like to thank the College of Business for helping us out and helping out with all the logistics that it's taken. Especially Jennifer, the office manager in the Department of Finance, who's done a great job. And of course, we'd like to thank the ROTC guys for helping us with the classroom. We really appreciate it. Finally, I would like to thank the three guys who came here. So I'm going to briefly introduce them. I'm serious when I say this. If you want to know more about any one of these gentlemen, all you have to do is Google their name, and you'll find their bio written in about 15 different styles. These are all well-known Korean military or human rights experts. So it's our honor to have them here. First of all is Mark Tokola, who is also a retired State Department, what do you call that? Foreign Service Officer, right. I'm just a broken down old ex-gunny. But he has a long and distinguished career in the State Department, followed by a now new career as a vice president of what is probably the best think tank dealing with Korean issues in Washington, D.C., the Korea Economic Institute, which now for the 5th year in a row has paid for us to have a symposium here at Angelo State. So we're very grateful for that. The next gentleman sitting next to him is named Greg Scarletou, who's a graduate of the Fletcher School. Anybody know what the Fletcher School is? At Tufts University, the very first university to have an international relations program. He was also the first person from Romania. Greg is an American now, a naturalized citizen. He was the first person from Romania who did not go to Kim Il-sung University from the 1940s through the 1980s and into the early 1990s. All the Warsaw Pact countries had exchange programs with North Korea. Well, the wall came down, as did a whole lot in Eastern Europe, as he was getting ready to go to school. So he switched and ended up going to Seoul National University instead. By the way, a much better school than Kim Il-sung University, at least in my view. So he is the executive director of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, an expert on human rights. In fact, he testifies in front of Congress every single year and has done so every year since he's been the director of HRNK. Our third guest here is a retired 4-star general, the former Commander-in-Chief, or CINC, of United States Forces Korea, Combined Forces Command and UN Command, General John Tillelly. Again, I urge you to Google his name and his biography. It's very impressive. He is an expert in planning for the Korean War or Korean conflict or Korean collapse, and I'm sure he'll love to have your questions tonight after he speaks. So that's our three people who will be speaking. Again, I'm Bruce Bechtel, and I'm just a good old boy. So I'm going to pass this on to Mark Tokola, and I'm going to sit down.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bechtel. Dr. Bechtel didn't brag about himself enough either. He's one of the most distinguished members of our panel. Your very own Dr. Bechtel is one of the most renowned and influential scholars on Korea. So you're very fortunate to have him here, and we're fortunate to have him as a colleague. I'll just say one more word about my institution, KEI. We were founded in 1982 for the purpose of improving understanding between the United States and the Republic of Korea. If you'd like to learn more about our organization or read more about Korea, I would refer you to our website, which is at keia.org. We have a lot of papers on that website and podcasts and blogs, so please look at it. I'm just going to make a couple of framing comments and I'll turn to my colleagues. I'm going to ask each of the three to speak for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we want to get quickly to questions and comments, because I really want to be able to take the conversation in the direction you'd like to go in. So my framing comments are just, let's look first at the respective size of South Korea and North Korea, the amount of influence and power they have. Republic of Korea, South Korea, has about 50 million people. It has a per capita, it has a GDP as a nation per year about $1.5 trillion, which makes South Korea the 11th biggest economy in the world. By comparison, North Korea has about half the population, about 25 million, and the total national GDP of North Korea, as estimated by the CIA, including all their black market illegal activity, so it's the whole GDP, is about $40 billion a year. That's 40, which means North Korea's economy is smaller than the economy of Des Moines, Iowa. So what they've done with a little bit of resources they have is impressive. My next two comments will just be to look at North Korea's strategic goals. We've all heard about their nuclear program. What's the program for? What's the point of having nuclear weapons? I think it's probably best to look at what they say themselves. North Korea is often very transparent about what their objectives are. They announce them in their party speeches and congresses and their public comments. North Korea says the purpose of nuclear weapons is to be recognized as nuclear power, to join the world's ranks of the elite powers. Second, to have sanctions lifted. Third, to remove US forces from the Korean Peninsula. And fourth, to unify the peninsula on North Korea's terms. So that's what North Korea says the purpose of their weaponry is. Last comment is what's going to happen next. We'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but just as a teaser at the top, I think three things could happen. One is we could have an outbreak of diplomacy. I think it's very possible we could start talks with North Korea one way or another. If we do that, we're used to it. We've had talks before. The second possibility would be the fall of the regime. And I won't predict how that might happen or advocate it or say it's going to happen. It's a possibility. Could be a helicopter crash, health crisis, a coup, an assassination, or a misguided war. But something could end the Kim regime. That's a second possibility. The third is the status quo. I mean, why might we not be here 5 years from now, talking about North Korea's 20th nuclear test and their next range of missiles? We've been doing this for a long time. Why wouldn't that just continue? I think it's a fair question. Of the three possibilities, diplomacy we know how to do. We've done it before. Status quo, we're all used to. We're living the status quo now. The one that actually worries me most is the collapse of the Kim regime, because I'm not sure we're ready for that. How we deal with the collapse of North Korea is a huge policy challenge, both for South Korea and the United States and our other allies. So I'll stop with that and turn right to Greg.
Well, thank you very much. Is this mic working? Everybody okay? Outstanding. Well, thank you, Dr. Bechtold, Professor Bechtold, Vice President Tokola, Angela State, KEI, for the invitation. True honor to be on this august panel today. If there's one thing that we know about North Korea, is that it is a criminal regime. In February 2014, a UN Commission of Inquiry submitted a 372-page report to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, a report that found that many of the egregious human rights violations happening in North Korea pursuant to policies established at the highest level of the state amount to crimes against humanity. The UN Commission of Inquiry report further recommended that North Korea, the North Korean case, be submitted to the International Criminal Court, to the ICC. This was followed by strong UN General Assembly resolutions in 2014, 15, 16, strong UN Human Rights Council resolutions in 2014, 15, 16, that included language on both crimes against humanity and referral to the ICC, We also saw the human rights issue being placed on the agenda of the UN Human Rights Council in December 2014, 15, and 16. Today, the North Korean regime, the Kim family regime, is still running a political prison camp system. 120,000 men, women, and children are being held at 5 political prison camps, oftentimes members of the same family. That is because the Kim regime applies a system of guilt by association called Yeonjaje. We have many Korean speakers in the audience today. This is a system of guilt by association, of feudal inspiration. Up to 3 generations of the same family are sent to the gulags for the perceived offenses of one family member. My organization investigates the North Korean political prison camps and other detention facilities through the extensive use of satellite imagery analysis, also through interviews with survivors, former guards who have escaped the country and are now living in South Korea or other countries. We have also developed the capability of having some sources inside the country contacted basically on a combination of smuggled Chinese cell phone and official North Korean cell phone. Many political prisoners are held at other types of facilities. For example, at the Kyohwa-so, re-education through labor. So basically people, the difference between the Kyohwa-so and the Kwali-so political prison camp is that at the Kyohwa-so they actually receive sentences after going through a semblance of judicial process. North Korea is a country where the Kim regime discriminates against its own population pursuant to a system of social discrimination called Songbun, based on one's perceived loyalty to the regime, based on the perceived loyalty of the relatives, parents, grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts. People are classified into 3 main categories. Core class, 20 to 25% of the population. Wavering class, 40 to 60% of the population. Hostile class, 20 to 25% of the population. Although money plays a much more important role in North Korea today, the Songbun system of social classification still determines access to any type of opportunity. Jobs, a good position in the military, even a good marriage, because after all, the father of a girl of good Songbun will want her to marry a young man of good Songbun who will have opportunities in the future so that they may have hopefully a decent life. Of course, North Korea today is the world's most oppressive regime. Perhaps we should no longer see North Korea as a communist regime. It is truly a post-communist, post-industrial, kleptocratic dynasty. You will hear a lot about the markets in North Korea. As you know, under Kim Il-sung, North Korea claimed to be self-reliant under the doctrine of Juche, or self-reliance. Nothing could have been further from the truth. After the end of the Cold War, there was no more aid from fraternal communist countries, no more subsidized imports. They got hit by massive flooding, exacerbated by irrational deforestation, which resulted in soil erosion and soil depletion. Up to 3 million people died. In the mid to late 1990s, they died of hunger, and they died of disease induced by malnutrition. After that, informal markets have developed in North Korea. Many more people today depend on the markets than they did 20 years ago. Back in the day, before the famine, everyone depended on the public distribution system. The government would tell you, we'll give you whatever you need, as much as you need. Who decides? The government decides. How? Based on the job that you have. How is the job decided? Well, depending on your Songbun social classification. That's how it worked. It is a positive development that many more people depend on the markets today. It is a positive development that the regime is no longer able to extensively use food as a tool of social control. The problem is that private property does not exist in North Korea. If you look at the North Korean criminal code, each and every type of entrepreneurial activity is illegal. So this is simply a matter of the authorities turning a blind eye on entrepreneurial activity. You will hear that people drive cars in North Korea, which is true. A lot of Chinese cars, second-hand Japanese cars, perhaps German, even American in the case of the elites. You do not own a title. You have to register the car under a government agency. The same goes with houses. In the capital city of Pyongyang, where most of the elites live, an apartment costs up to $200,000. People do not purchase property. They actually purchase the right to reside. Now, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because this is a recipe for an unbelievable level of corruption. North Korea today is much more corrupt than it was under Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung. The differences between the people living in the capital city of Pyongyang and people living elsewhere in North Korea are the differences between living in a wealthy suburban community here in the United States and living in some godforsaken corner of the third world. So one argument that I try to make is that markets and tyranny have coexisted since times immemorial in ancient Babylon, Rome, Greece, and in the Game of Thrones. I've joined this distinguished panel today, and of course I hate to bring up the cliche, but I will refer to the application of all elements of national power to the dime. And while Vice President Okola, General Tileli, and Professor Bechtold will be surely addressing the D, the M, and the E in the dime, I think that as a human rights person in the room, it is my duty to address the I in the dime. The human security of the people of North Korea is extraordinarily precarious. This regime believes that it needs nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles in order to survive. This regime believes that it needs to keep its elites happy in order to survive. In order to do that, it needs hard currency and resources. It earns the hard currency and resources needed to survive by exploiting and oppressing its own people at home and abroad. We have basically documented the extensive use of forced labor, slave labor in North Korea's extractive industry, which provides the bulk of their exports. 60,000 North Korean workers are working overseas in 20 countries. Up to 90% of their salaries are confiscated by the regime. They're trapped under circumstances ranging from basically forced labor to outright slavery. So, what is there to do about it? Now, surely change can only come from the people of North Korea themselves. Through the markets that I mentioned, more information is entering the country, although this continues to be the world's most isolated and reclusive regime, although each and every North Korean continues to be subjected to an unbelievable level of surveillance, control, coercion, and punishment. Everybody watches everybody else. Each and every person has to participate in weekly ideological training sessions where they have to confess their trespasses for the past week. Everybody is under surveillance by the local neighborhood watch unit. So the perhaps change can for sure come only from the people of North Korea themselves. The one thing that we can do in order to offer them a fighting chance is to empower the people of North Korea through information from the outside world, through these markets, open markets, black markets. More North Koreans have access to USBs, DVDs, thumb drives, memory chips, some of them containing South Korean Hallyu drama, South Korean K-pop music. So many of them have come in contact with the outside world. It is very important to enable them through information. There are radio stations that broadcast to North Korea, Radio Free Asia, Voice of America, 4 stations based in Seoul, staffed with North Korean defectors. It is very important at this stage to tell them 3 basic stories. The first story is the story of the outside world, in particular the story of free, democratic, prosperous powerhouse South Korea. Second, tell them the story of the corruption of their leadership, in particular the corruption of the Kim family, or the inner core of the Kim family. And third, tell them the story of their own human rights, which they do not understand living under this kind of regime. Now, of course, information, the next step will be social cohesion, because of the surveillance, coercion, control, punishment that I mentioned, is very difficult for people to coalesce, to get together, to organize. It will take that set of skills as well. And then change requires courage. I am by no means advocating for violent change in North Korea, talking about a possible post-unification period transition. It would be ideal to begin educating the people of North and South Korea as well on the benefits, so not only the cost of unification, the benefits for a unified Korea as a whole, and benefits for everyone on an individual level. That said, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Well, work on the line.
First, I want to thank KEI for conducting this panel and inviting us here. And the university, great university, and lovely university to host this. What I'm going to talk about is my personal opinion, and talk about Korea writ large. And when you think about it, I'm going to try to talk about strategic issues and put it in the context of some of the things that have already been said. And when you think about strategic issues, you not only have to think about the peninsula itself, you have to think about Northeast Asia, because of where it sits and the impact of any sort of a crisis on a peninsula it would have in Northeast Asia and globally. So you've heard a little bit about Kim Jong-un, and he's the third in line of what I would call a crime family cult. And I think that best describes it in my view of how the three Kims, if you will, have managed or mismanaged North Korea. We talk about collapse a lot, but I think you have to put that in perspective, that Kim Jong-un has been in power over 5 years, which is longer than one term of a U.S. president. So the theory of collapse may be well-founded, and again, he consolidated his power and continues to consolidate his power through purges and executions, to include executing his own family members. His main objective, and the main objective of North Korea over time, has been to keep the regime in power. In a real sense, take all steps to do that. And Kim Jong-un has been single-minded in his term as the great leader, or the whatever leader, in developing a nuclear and an ICBM program. And we've seen that through the number of nuclear tests, which have not abated, and the number of missile tests, which have increased. And in my view, my personal view, it's going to be very difficult to cause him to surrender his nuclear program. So that is really a strategic issue that has to be addressed if we believe there's going to be peace in the region and in the Republic of Korea. He continues provocations. If you haven't seen the video of how they handled defectors, take a look at the recent defector of a North Korean soldier crossing the DMZ at the Joint Security Area, where North Korean military fired on their own soldier defecting and fired across the DMZ, which is a clear violation of the armistice. Now, when all that's said, you say to yourself, is he rational? Is he suicidal? I would say he's not suicidal. You've heard Greg talk about North Korean population. In a real sense, the people of North Korea are probably second or third in the great construct of things. The regime and the coterie around the regime and the elitists are the ones who are taken care of, and the people suffer what they must to survive the experience. And when you think about the people of the Republic of North Korea, essentially they are in a vacuum, a communications vacuum as to what's going on outside of North Korea. Now, there has been economic reform, its economic reform that's growing slowly, and its development of a market economy, but it's out of necessity rather than out of direction. So in that context, it is very difficult when you think about the population of North Korea. There have been more defections in 2017 than in any other year. And when we think about collapse, or we think about internal strife, or we think about a coup, or any of those words that you like to use, there does not appear to be any large-scale dissident movement. And if everyone is looking at everyone else and every neighbor is reporting on everyone else, it would be very difficult to execute that to start with. The North Korean military, which is, again, one of the strategic issues we have to think about 1.2 million under arms, plus a very large reserve. Most of them are south of Pyongyang, which is the capital of North Korea, between Pyongyang and the demilitarized zone. It has a very large conventional force, but it has a very large missile, artillery, and rocket force that can all range Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea. It continues to train. It, in a real sense, so violates the armistice time and again. And you can go back year on year and find, you can go back almost every other year and find some violation of the armistice. The biggest one, I think, was the sinking of the Cheonan ship, which was a South Korean ship, or the firing on a civilian island called Waipido in South Korea. So the fact that you have military, a North Korean military, which is willing to do that, it is not doing it without direction. Things don't happen serendipitously in North Korea. They happen directionally from the top. We have the ROK, the ROK, U.S. alliance. It has kept peace and stability on the peninsula since the armistice was signed in 1953. It is probably a model alliance. It is one of the best alliances that the United States has. It is not only a bilateral alliance, but it's a military alliance. We work together day in and day out to solve the issues associated with North Korea. The saying in the alliance is we have to be ready to fight tonight for the military alliance, and that is not only a bumper sticker, that's a fact. Because you don't know what is going to happen, you have to be prepared all the time. It's one of the places where I would say that the men and women who serve there are probably more alert on a day-by-day basis than anywhere else we serve. The South Koreans, and many don't know this because we forget history. The Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea Armed Forces have been with the United States of America any place we have gone. They were with us in Vietnam. They lost the second largest number of troops, 5,099 troops. They've been with us in Iran. They were with us in Afghanistan. They were with us in Bosnia-Herzegovina, providing support troops. So they've been with us each and every time we have asked. So they have supported the U.S. in missions. When you think about the people of the Republic of Korea, I think you have differing opinions. I think the goal is peace and stability and peaceful reunification of the peninsula. The strategic question is, how do you get there? And when we think about the nuclear issue today, we cannot think about the nuclear issue that it happened in the last year or the last 2 years. This has been an issue that has been going on since 1994. And the programs have accelerated since 1994 to the point where we are today. Where the latest firing, we believe he has an ICBM long-range capability, and I think it's problematic whether or not he has a miniaturized nuclear program where he can put it on an ICBM. Regionally, you have to consider Japan. This is also an issue with Japan. Japan has been working closely with the U.S. and in intelligence sharing with the Republic of Korea. And in a real sense, they are in the range of not only their ICBM missiles, but certainly their medium-range missiles. The last actor in this that I will talk about, and a strategic actor, is China. There has been lots of discussion, not only by the current administration, but by the Iraq administration and also by the Chinese government, that they're going to take steps to help bring this to what I would call a successful conclusion. The China, I think for the first time, and I may be wrong on this, you guys who are smart have to correct me on this, first time took UNSC punitive action and sanctions against North Korea because of nuclear and long-range missile tests. However, they continue to attend to the needs of North Korea. And those needs that I'm talking about are generally food and fuel. And in my mind's eye, and in my personal opinion, they are yet to be convinced that a reunified peninsula is better for them than a divided peninsula. So in that context, they are a player. They certainly can help bring this to a successful and peaceful solution. However, I personally have not seen it yet. At the same time, when you think about China and the region, they are increasing their military superiority within the region and across the board. And you can think about the islands that they are creating, which are military installations. So what is my conclusion when you think about the strategic issue and the dangers associated with the strategic issues? In my conclusion is, it's a very dangerous time. In a real sense, it's a time that could lead to miscalculation by one of the four sides. And in fact, as a function of miscalculation, cause crisis. And crisis on the peninsula is something that none of us want to think about, because it would be tremendously catastrophic to the people of the Republic of Korea, and realistically to Northeast Asia writ large. At the same time, I would say that, and Greg has talked about the elements, we call it DIME, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. In a real sense, when you think about it, hopefully the diplomatic solution will cause us to come to yes through the use of the means of strong deterrence, which is your military solution, information, which gets you information to the people of North Korea, and the economic sanctions and economic pressures that are put on by the global community and not just the United States.